This is Nita, and I'll try to tell a little background about before I went to camp and about my first years there. I first heard of life camps through a friend, Garrett Tatum. Tatum, as some of you remember her. She had been working as a dietitian at the boys' camp Raritan. She kept telling me about life camp and insisted that I apply. My reply was always, I'm happy where I am, which was part of each summer spent as a counselor and later as director of a girls' camp called Camp Cherokee, sponsored by the Bristol YMCA and located in the Holston Mountains nearby. The rest of the summer I spent at Camp Shiwassee, which was in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, in the Smoky Mountains. Here I taught horseback riding and did some instructions in crafts and a little of everything else. Finally, in the fall of 1937, when I was preparing for a visit to West Point, Tatum insisted that if I went to New York City, I should try to go by the camp office and speak to her friends L.B. Sharp and Dorothy Burns there. As we planned to go into the city from West Point for a weekend at Governor's Island with friends, and by the way, to see Richard Burton in Macbeth in New York, I mentioned Tatum's request. So, by the office we went. And after delivering message from Tatum, Dr. Sharp, who later became L.B. to me, asked what I did during the summers, and would I be interested in a camp job. Well, maybe, I said. So he said Miss Goodrich would begin hiring staff after Christmas. She was at that time teaching in Texas. After Christmas, I did write to Miss Goodrich and got a response offering me a job with a salary of $80, which sounded tremendous. Anyway, I accepted her offer, and in June took off for the big city and up to Branchville, Connecticut. Anyway, this camping area was within walking distance from the little railroad station, and I remember how good it made me feel when Miss Goodrich recognized me and called me by name. At the camp, there was a beautiful large old farmhouse which was called the White House. It housed an office and Miss Goodrich's bedroom, a beautiful living room with baby grand piano and a little organ, plus comfortable chairs and a divan, as I remember. And back of that was the infirmary, and upstairs were rooms and a large attic or closet where we kept our city clothes. Downstairs in the basement, which we entered from the outside, were shelves where our food orders were placed. Back of the White House was a large dining hall and kitchen, and above the dining hall was a spacious room that was the craft room. And somewhere in that same was a swimming pool, which Bruce scrubbed out at regular intervals. Also nearby was what was called the Crooked House, which had been built by campers and was for the youngest group. There was a large tent field for games, etc., and extra counselors slept in tents placed around this field. We had a nature house, and a pretty stream ran nearby, and the pioneers with their wagons were not too far from there. Up the hill from the tent field and through the woods was Sherwood Forest, the oldest girls' group. Not too far from there, a little closer to the tent field, was our camp, called Donkey Trail. No water was piped up to us, so each day after the noon meal, we checked out our food, and the packed baskets of food were loaded on Jenny, and the water cans were tied on Jack, and up the hill we went. There was a goat, Melinda, that lived in the pen with the donkeys, and she thought she was a donkey, and had to go out each time the donkeys went. One day, I was told that the photographers of Life magazine were coming to make movies and wanted to have a good donkey episode. They wanted to see us pack the donkeys and lead them up the donkey trail and be sure that one of them would bray. I found that if someone would lead Jenny on ahead, that as soon as Jenny was out of sight, Jack would bray. So when the big day came, some campers and the other counselor went on ahead, and the campers and I stayed back and adjusted. Some of the campers and I stayed back and adjusted the straps on Jack. When Jenny was out of sight, Jack let out a very big hee-haw. During that summer, we had in our group Clem DeGeronimo, now Clem Lurie, and Jane Davy, now Jane Bonchorno, and we kept up with each other through all these years. Then came closing time. We brought in everything on the campers' last day and all slept in the big recreation hall or something. I don't think this was a dining hall, but we can't really place it. Miss Goodrich came around the next morning and wakened each counselor. We had a big closing counselor dinner. I can't remember whether that was the night before or after the campers left. Anyway, it was a beautiful dinner, and LB appeared with a big surprise announcement that land in New Jersey had been set aside for us to have our camp. Miss Goodrich, as she still was to me, had told me that she was to stay in New York the next winter and work in the city office, and asked me to stay and look for a job. When LL was over and we had done some packing and the putting away of things, Miss Goodrich, Dr. and Mrs. Sharp, and daughter Frances and I went to our promised land in New Jersey. On our way, we spent a night at Camp Raritan with Martin and Therese Graffel, the caretakers, then continued on to Lake Mashipacong. The sight was unbelievable. At that time, the old tavern, now the lodge, was the home of the Quirkendalls, who were the caretakers. Also on the property was a dilapidated cabin down by what we later called the Old Dock. There were two other buildings, a two-story house where Pixie's Camp is now located, and the other that's now Fisherman's Cabin. We put our huts on the wavy, rickety porch of the cabin near the Old Dock, and there we camped for about a week. While there, we explored and planned and dreamed about where the dining hall, small camps, etc. would be located. I didn't always go on all the exploration trips because sometimes Frances and I would go fishing and exploring around the lake in a small boat that we found. I remember very well a most exciting day when Dr. Sharp took us to Lost Lake. On our way out, a terrible storm came up, and every few minutes he would ask if we wanted to turn back. Of course, there were shouts of no, so we continued on our way in spite of the pouring rain and lightning and thunder. We finally reached our destination, and as we got to the lake itself, there was a beautiful rainbow. That day we saw the sundew, orchids, pitcher plants, tamarack trees, cranberry vines, and pussy toes. What a day to remember. I also recall a special day when we sat where the dining hall now stands and visualized, each one in our own minds, where the dining hall and the store of the future would be. Doing this has brought back many memories. I've enjoyed it. Many memories kept piling on. My love to each one of you. Signing off, this is Nita.
Me and my burro, we're on our last long ride. We're headed for the promised land upon old Jordan's side, where everyone's an angel and everything is free, where the winds and storms can't hurt you as you enter Galilee. Where the lust for gold's forgotten and sorrows never know. We'll keep their 10 commandments and your soul is all your own. Me and my burro, we're on our last long ride. We're headed for the promised land on old Jordan's side.